Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session this afternoon, Innovative Ways to Create Community Impact. We are going to give everybody a minute to join the Zoom room and get started before we get started here. So welcome to everybody as you are joining. I see some faces or some names that were with us in our earlier session, so welcome back for those of you that are joining again. And welcome to those of you that are with us for the first time this afternoon. So we're going to give everybody just a minute to get into the room. While we're doing that, if you would navigate over to the chat and just say hello, tell us where you're joining from, introduce yourself. That way you all can see who else is on the line and our presenters can see who's listening today. So go ahead and go over to the chat and introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining from. My name is Erica Bader and I'm the Vice President of Content and Learning with ACCP, and I am joining from sunny Florida today. So for those of you that are on the East Coast, welcome. Good afternoon. For those of you on the other coast, good midday to you. So head over to the chat and introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining from, and we are going to go ahead and get started with our introduction so we can hand it off to our speakers. I want to welcome everybody again to the CSR Marketplace Live. These are pre-conference sessions that we are running in conjunction with our CSR partners in the field. And we are so happy to have these sessions and for our partners for their support. We appreciate their support of ACCP and of our conference. And we're particularly excited about Impact Parks, who's joining us for the first time this year. So welcoming them to the partner fold. We are using Zoom today, as you can see. We will be engaging in the live transcript. So if you need that service that's available to you, we have that turned on. You can navigate to the bottom of your screen and click view full transcript if that's helpful. The subtitles should be showing up on your screen. You can also hide the subtitles if those are distracting for you. That's up to you based on what is most useful for you in terms of engaging with us this afternoon. We will be in the chat, so go ahead and pop over to the chat. Again, if you haven't introduced yourself and told us where you're from, please go ahead and do that. That's just helpful for everybody to know who's on the line. At any point in time, you can use the chat to share with panelists and attendees. Just don't forget to click that all panelists and attendees button so that everybody can see that chat. We will be taking questions. We'll be holding them until the end. We will be using the Q&A feature to take those questions. So at any point during the presentation, if you have a question, you can go ahead and enter it into the Q&A. And we'll also be using the upvote feature. So if there's a question that's already in the list that you are also interested in, you can hit that thumbs up, and that helps us prioritize the questions when we get to the end. A recording of the session along with any supporting materials will be sent out. Look for those next week. We'll get those out to you by midweek. And just want to encourage folks, if you haven't already, to join us at our virtual conference, which is December 7th through 9th. Hopefully we will see you there for some more learning and engagement sessions. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers today. Before I do that, I want to introduce Catherine Barnes, who you see in the chat. She is on the Impact Parks team, and she is not presenting, but she is going to be engaging in the chat. So if you see a message from Catherine, she is on the team as well. But today our presenters are Russell Carson and Kent Callison, both with Impact Parks. And like I said, it's their first time joining us at an ACCP event, and we are thrilled to have them here and to learn from them for the next 45 minutes. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Russell and Kent, and let you all jump in and get started.
Thank you, Erica. Welcome, everyone. Kent and I are thrilled to be here today to talk to you about a unique collaborative we call Impact Parks. And Impact Parks is about you. It's about connecting you with communities and with funders and all organizations out there that are philanthropic to promote better health and wellness. You know, we have a turnkey approach we'll take you through. Yes, it's about building parks and recreation, outdoor public green spaces, and to do so in a way that's community engaged, that brings people together, and that promotes health and wellness. As you all know, with your organizations, and many corporations and foundations are about corporate social responsibility. But the challenge that we've come across is that we do this in a way without connecting it to clear outcomes and clear ways to measure results. So what you're going to hear today is our research-based approach that collects information and data, that reports on data, especially around usage, so that you and with your community know the full impact of your efforts. So it's not just about the build, but it's really about having a campaign around your brand and promoting this throughout your commitment to your community. So with that, we now know, and certainly the last couple of years has reminded us about this, it really has elevated this, that outdoor public spaces play a key role in improving community health, equity, quality of life for all people. And we believe by elevating these public outdoor spaces, leaders nationwide, can drive more outcomes, especially around equitable outcomes in the communities that they serve. So what you're going to hear today is what we're doing and we'll share a lot of examples of how organizations out there have shifted their focus on philanthropic funding to invest in communities through these spaces, such as parks. We'll share how these investments have resulted in outcomes for their funding organization, and possibly even more important, around how it's resulted in impact on their community and where their investment dollars are spent. So before we dive into more specifics about impact parks, we want to start with a poll question to get a sense of who's here today and what your interests are. So you see there, what are your biggest challenges when trying to select a signature giving campaign? And you can select as many as you'd like. Is it about identifying what the needs are in the community? Is it around aligning it to your values and aligning the campaign with the corporate values? Is it the lack of engagement and understanding of your cause? Is it too many requests for funding? Or if there's any of those that don't really fit, certainly provide other in the chat box, and we look at those as well. So the results, thanks to most those who've submitted, it seems pretty equitable, really, right? In terms of aligning it to your values, the campaign to your values, getting engagement and understanding that, as well as a lot of requests for funding. That's really tremendous information. And I'm looking in the chat and I don't see too many others. So excellent. If you have other comments or thoughts about challenges, please feel free to add those in the chat. So since we're talking about results and outcomes, let's going to start with some results that we know. Why focus on outdoor spaces, specifically parks? Well, we know from research, especially in the last 18 months, people are visiting parks and getting outside for the social interaction, for the mental health and physical activity. You can see the numbers on the screen. 260 million people visit a local park. This has been in the past year. Trust for Public Land has also been tracking some of this, and they found that more than 100 million people in communities across America don't have access to a park that's within a 10-minute walk. And we feel that's way too many in terms of what we can really accomplish out there. We also see from polling data that nearly 9 in 10 people agree that it's important to fund local parks and recreation agencies to ensure every member of the community has access, specifically equitable access to amenities, infrastructure, programming. And really, at the end of the day, this shows us that since this pandemic, there's really been an average of 30% increase in park visitor use across the US. And now it's important for us to ensure we have access, the ability for folks to access these parks. And so it's important for people, as we now know, right, to get outside for those health benefits. So we're excited to share with you our Turnkey Opportunity, to work with your partners, to work with you all, and to revitalize and engage and transform outdoor community spaces. And we do this in many ways. You can see that on the screen with the different photos. We're about community engagement, to understand community need. We do everything from designing the parks We do everything from the grand openings, of course, and to the selections of the type of amenities that fit the community needs. We have over 30 plus brands within the PlayCore family that fall within this collaborative of impact parks. We, of course, do the construction. We, like I said, do the grand openings and get excited about that. And, oftentimes that's where some of this might stop, but we don't stop. We keep going, and it's all about the data collection and measurements in terms of the results and reporting that, of course, back out to you all, as well as in any of your constituents. So the numbers have showed why parks and outdoor spaces are important. But now I'm excited to shift to that last piece that's often missing, and that's just how we at Impact Parks, measure the impact of what these kind of builds can have on communities. We feel measurement's the key. So as you see on the screen here, there's many ways we can do this. We offer this as a service. We have a whole framework that we built our services around, and this framework is a really comprehensive approach to thinking about health and wellness outcomes in the community. It's about gathering this data, to understanding the need, understanding what attractions might fit those needs, and also to think about this as applying it to what we know in the research in terms of the evidence-based design principles to meet those needs. And once this happens and the community engagement happens, we understand the needs, we build the designs, and we have the builds and grand openings. The question is, how do we measure the outcomes? And just as a couple of many examples, a lot of our sites have signage to elevate and to showcase that this site was created with the community in mind, was created around what we know in the research and putting it into practice. And so there's a signage for promotion, potentially in branding opportunities there, as well as a QR code. Thankfully, we know from last several months that we all know how to use a QR code, it feels. So scan the QR code for on-site usage and user experience data. We also about engaging communities. That's another option, right? In terms of whether it be focus groups or being on site and having more intercept surveys with folks. And another one is about this idea of usage data and collection. And we can do that in a lot of different ways from an objective standpoint, as well, with even some of the technology out there with phones and capturing that around usage and mapping that to see outcomes as well. What does all that result in? It's not just collecting data for data collection purposes. It's also putting it into a nice visually, attractive report with not only the numbers, but also the quotes that bring the meaning to life of those numbers. And you can see here on the screen, this is one sample of what we call a site impact report. This one was collected just from the QR scans, honestly, over a series of time. And then if you have multiple sites, or it's a campaign that has multiple sites throughout an area, we can, since we're managing the measurement side of it, we can put that all together in a collective impact report to really know collectively what the campaign has meant for your community and your constituents in your community. We've learned data is valuable, outcomes are certainly valuable, but really at the end of the day, it's about telling a story. And we do that with a lot of different ways, and understanding not only the community need around health and wellness, but collecting data around usage, around users, whether it be age brackets and group sizes and things, as well as user experiences, what the site has meant to them and their community. And we can custom questions as well to fit your values and what you're trying to accomplish. We offer toolkits. So these every site and folks working with that site, we offer toolkits to try to market, what's going on at the site, that the data being collected at the site, what's being happening with it, why is it important? We offer press releases and social media posts, survey links if folks forget about it or don't have access to, scanning the QR code if that's what the option is. And at the end of the day, we know it's also about what does these data mean nationally, or what does it mean in terms of comparing it to what we are trying to aspire to accomplish. And so we've done a lot of legwork of going into literature and the research and pulling out what we call sound bites, which are nuggets to help us understand really, what sites can accomplish and where maybe your site is in terms of benchmarking against some of those national kind of goals and recommendations. So super exciting. We can certainly answer more questions about this. We want to kind of be general here, but I want to turn it over to poll number 2. to get a sense of your interest and thoughts around measurement and evaluation. So how effective in your campaign is your campaign measurement and outcomes reporting? And you can see there, I'm able to collect all the data I need to make decisions. I'm able to collect some of the information, but not enough to satisfy stakeholders and tell your story. And we don't have a framework in place to measure outcomes. So take a few more seconds. Curious about, and please feel free to use the chat if you want to elaborate on your response here. Yep, and that's kind of what we've been hearing is we want to collect impact data and drive, outcomes and showcase those outcomes. But I don't have enough, capacity to do that, or enough ability to do that, or I don't even know where to start to do that. So hoping that what you heard here gives you some of a sense of, what Impact Parks is trying to do to support some of those needs and interests. And so with that, I'm super excited to turn over to my partner here. And now it's about telling our story through a lot of the visuals and some of the examples that we have out there from our Impact Park projects. Kent?
Russ, thanks so much. I appreciate it. As Russ was saying, the real magic of any successful CSR project is to be able to capture that data and understand how effective your efforts are in the community. And some of these projects that I want to show you, that's really been the cornerstone, is making sure that they can tell what's working and what to improve over time. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these. So let me start out with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee is the largest private insurer in our state, where I am here in Tennessee. They also have a charitable foundation called the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee Foundation, which I will from now on be referring to as BCBST. It's becomes a mouthful. They have been funding these projects across the state that they call Healthy Places. They began this in 2017. And so far, they have worked with Impact Parks to launch 17 across the state. You can see some of the locations here. And they're continuing to receive applications from communities who want to bring a healthy place into their community. A healthy place is exactly what it sounds like. It is an outdoor space where people of all ages, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, can come together and experience physical activity, fun, socialization, things that in many cases communities just don't have the resources for. And Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation has been able to make that happen. Let me show you the one of the biggest ones that we've worked on so far. That's in Memphis, Tennessee, David Carnes Park. Now this is a large park. It's about 9 acres inside the Whitehaven community in Memphis. But as you can see, when we first arrived at the park, it was underutilized. There was a pavilion that was in disrepair. There was a small playground that had been there for a decade or more that had lots of broken pieces. Really, the only part of the park that was being utilized on a regular basis were the walking trails. You can see those on the left. So our first step, as Russ was talking about, was to get to know the community better and understand what they needed most. And we worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield to schedule town hall meetings and community work group sessions. We even sat down with kids at a local school and asked them to draw their dream playground and to draw their dream park, because the information we gathered from them was going to inform the decisions that we made in terms of designing this new space. Let's take a look at some more photos here. As you can see, we took that information back and we started working with landscape architect and construction specialists on our Impact Parks team to develop a master plan. What is this 9-acre park going to look like after we transform it? And you can see some of the areas that we highlighted on the left that we felt like we could really take to the next level, make it more engaging for family members and for children. Let's go to the next slide. And then we got to work. The most exciting part of any project is the beginning, when you have the groundbreaking, and we brought the community out for that, as well as employees from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Every step of this project was all about community engagement and employee engagement. As you see on the right, we even had days during the project. It was a very long construction project, but there were opportunities for employees in Memphis to come out and be a part of it, to assemble pieces of the playground, to add pieces of the fitness equipment. Obviously, when construction wasn't happening and when it was safe to do so, but it really made a difference for the people of Blue Cross in Memphis to understand firsthand why this project was so important. And then you can see some of the finished images. Right up front is this really large inclusive playground for children, really of all ages and abilities, and creating accessible routes of travel in and out of that playground was important to the community. They had not had a playground like this ever in the Whitehaven community, and so it was important for them to have something that addressed the needs of everyone who lived there now and the people who had lived there for years to come. You can see some of the multi-generational activities that are made possible now with spinning activities and merry-go-rounds. And over on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of people working out on the exercise equipment. Again, designed for people of all fitness levels and all abilities. And these exercise stations are located along those walking trails. We preserved all the walking trails in the park and added more to it, and then added some fitness stations along the way. And Memphis is hot. I don't know how many of you have ever lived in Memphis, but it is hot in the summer, and the summer seems to last about 11 months. So a splash pad was an important amenity to make sure that kids could cool off, families could come together. And it's also a zero entry accessible splash pad. So anyone of any ability can participate in the fun. And then on the right, you see a great photo of a dad and his son. They're on a 40-yard dash that we added to the park. That's right next to an outdoor obstacle course. So really great opportunity for children and parents to play and exercise together. And one thing I hope you've seen throughout this project is the Blue Cross Foundation logo is everywhere. And that's by design. It's intentional. Blue Cross Blue Shield wanted to make sure that people understood that they had a real commitment to community health and wellness, so much so that they brought these spaces to life. So I think it's important when you're aligning your brand with projects like these to make sure your logo's there. It will be the lowest cost per impression advertising you'll ever experience. It'll also give you the most long-term impact. Two more things about this park that are really cool. One, David Carnes, the namesake for this park, he was one of the first African-American landowners in Memphis, and he was a blacksmith. And it was important to the community to remember him and the heritage of the Whitehaven community. So on the left, you can see we built this marker, this historical marker along one of the playful pathways in the park as people are walking by, and it's a blacksmith shop. And so while children are pretending to work in a blacksmith shop, they can also read on the plaque the information about David Carnes and get to know a little bit more about their history and their heritage. On the right, you can see one of the many pavilions that are in the park. This was key to bringing people together, and especially during the last 18, 20 months, having a central place in the community where people can come together. We've seen organizations use this for health and wellness checks. We've seen groups come in and stage food drives for people who are in need, especially during the pandemic. It's been so critical to have a community central location like this in Memphis. So this is another project that was part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee Foundation. CGLA is a magnet school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is a great story. So the school needed a recreational space. They needed athletic fields. They needed tennis courts and basketball courts. But this wasn't just for the school. CGLA is in the middle of a large neighborhood. You know, Russ talked earlier about the need for parks and the need specifically for parks within a 10-minute walk of people who live nearby. And there's just not one in this neighborhood of Highland Park. But with this project at CGLA, we were able to bring really this beautiful 5.5 acre new park and playground and sports fields to thousands, literally thousands of families who can walk there every day because of a really great infrastructure system of sidewalks and accessible pathways leading to the park. You can see here a lot of the construction process that went on. We had folks from the Blue Cross office in Chattanooga. We had members of the local school and members of the community all coming together to help build this location. And there you can see some of the finished images. It's a beautiful space. The students love it. The community loves it. And what's really great about it is not only are we seeing people actively using it, we're getting data back on how they're using it and what it means to the community and how that translates into a benefit to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee and informs their decision-making when they're planning new projects. All right, let's change gears a little bit here. The Indianapolis Colts, this organization needs no introduction. They're an NFL team. And part of their goal as part of their Play 60 initiative was to bring outdoor spaces to entire families in the community and then also to individual schools. And I want to start with this project at Riverside Park. Working with Impact Parks, the Indianapolis Colts identified that this park was underactivated, wasn't being utilized as much as it used to be. And a lot of that was because there weren't enough amenities and activities for people between the ages of 12 and 50. Under 12, lots of kids showed up. Over 50, lots of adults showed up. But that middle group, they really needed to address the needs of that group. And so we worked with them to build an outdoor obstacle course, a 40-yard dash, some outdoor fitness equipment for older teens and adults. And the result is that group of people came in. It activated the park and it brought in the people who needed it the most. And then on the other side of that, let's take a look at the next project. The Indianapolis Colts also decided that it was important to get into the schools to make sure that not only were they getting their name in front of the students so they'll support their favorite home team, but to make sure that they were contributing to that 60 minutes of physical activity every day. And what better place to do that than at a public school? And so now there are nearly 20 public schools that have Indianapolis Colts Play 60 playgrounds. And in most of them, they're also open to the community as well. So there's a great outdoor space within walking distance of people's homes. Let me go back to a healthcare provider. This is Trillium Health Resources in North Carolina. Trillium decided it was time to do something about creating a culture of inclusion across the entire state. And they looked at the areas of North Carolina that were being underserved, mostly rural areas that were typically forgotten by organizations who would come in and promote inclusion or diversity or equity. And they decided, this is our time. This is what we're going to do. And so they've mapped out all the communities across North Carolina that needed the most help. And then they set up a program whereby communities could apply for grant funding. And they funded between $175,000 to $750,000 for these outdoor spaces. All of them had a common theme. They all had to be inclusive. They had to be based on best practice research to make sure that people of all abilities and ages were able to play together and realize the same benefits from these spaces. They also had to have a commitment from the local parks department to maintain these spaces long-term for two reasons. One, they were aligning their name and their brand with them, and they wanted to make sure that they were taken care of long-term and create a positive image for their brand. But more importantly, they needed to make sure that these spaces were going to be helpful to the community for a very long time. It's too easy to come in and do a project that everyone gets excited about for a day or a month. These need to be effective for the next 15, 20 years. So they really create a great process to be able to make that happen. And then also a framework to measure the outcomes and the results of the project itself. So what are the results? When we look at these projects that I shared with you and look at the broader view of all the projects we've been working on average, there is a 25% increase among the community of a signature cause of that organization. So if you've ever tried to initiate a CSR activity and wondered, what do people think about it? Do they even know what we're trying to do? This approach has worked with an increase of 25% among the public. I think equally important is that 90% of the people surveyed have a very positive brand sentiment of the organization that creates these projects. 80% of the visitors spend at least a half hour at these destinations, and 95% of the people aren't just willing to come back, they're eager to come back, and they're returning on a regular basis to these spaces. So what can we do next? What are our next steps? If this is something that is of interest to you and you feel like it's a CSR effort that would really align with your organization, really there's three steps. One is you have to know what the community needs. And there is research that we can help you gather. There's some data we can help you gather. A lot of it is publicly available, but a lot of it is databases that we've mined over the years, and it helps us help our partners understand what the need really is. It might be access to more physical activity. It might be to build more social equity and social capital, or it might just be general health and wellness. Second, as I mentioned before, it's essential that you brand your initiatives in a way that aligns with your corporate values and with the community need. So it's not just good for you and it's not just good for them, it's a win-win for everyone, and it makes a lasting impact for decades to come when people come to these spaces and they know for a fact you're committed to the community. And then finally, like we've said several times now, it's so important to measure the outcomes and the community sentiment. Again, it's real easy to have everyone excited that they have a ribbon cutting, but how do they feel about it a year from now, 5 years from now? Are there things that need to be adjusted on your next project to really improve that sentiment? And so one of the things we want to provide you today, I know we have some questions and answers coming up, but there's a free resource that we want you to have. You can see the QR code on your screen. You can scan that now, or when you look at the recorded session or the slides. We are a PlayCore collaborative, and one of the resources PlayCore publishes is Placemaking Magazine. It's a terrific publication for anyone who's interested in creating these kinds of spaces in their community. The philanthropy issue is all about what we're talking about today, how to make sure you align your efforts with what matters most to your brand and to your community. And if you scan that, it'll take you to a web page where you can request a copy free of charge with no obligation. That's just our gift and resource to you today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Russ and let him close us out. And if we have any questions, we're happy to take them and provide you with answers.
Hey, Ken, actually, Catherine, and I see a few questions come in. We've got one question going back to the QR surveys. Russ, I'll let you answer this one. Are the on-site QR surveys up for a select time period, or are they monitored on a long-term ongoing basis to see the full spectrum of impact?
It's monitored for a long-term basis. And what's so unique about it is you think about branding and potentially putting branding and customization to the signs. We can even adjust the types of questions over a long period as well if you want to answer certain questions in certain phased approach.
All right, another one for you, Russ. What is the rate of response for the QR surveys? How many people actually are taking the survey?
Yeah, so it's monitored all the time. Once we get to about 50 scans, and that can vary how quickly that happens, we will then put together that report that you saw on the screen. And that's what we do as our service, our value add service. We have started to work with and have conversations with folks that say they want to get 50 scans very frequently. So we think about other ways to do that, whether it be geofencing and kind of capturing a geofence around the site to bring people in and or raise awareness of that community play space. So there's a lot of things we can do to ensure we capture the numbers that we were hoping to get, And I said also at the end, we're exploring other ways. We know there's other ways to capture usage data as well that's more objective and ongoing. So whether it be, looking at privacy filtered video on site and analyzing that data just from the usage perspective, or maybe, like I said, looking at some of the mapping of park estimates from cell phone technology and mobility data. So there's a whole continuum of options there.
Great. And I'm going to either Kent or Russ, I think either you can answer this one. For companies not in the health space, what are the benefits for supporting outdoor space projects?
So I'll take that first, and then Russ, you can follow on if you've got other feedback. I think for any company right now, in the world we find ourselves in, showing your commitment to better community health and wellness is always a win. You don't have to be an insurance company. You don't have to be a healthcare provider. You just have to care about the community. And there is nothing that demonstrates you're caring for the overall community more than a commitment to their bettering of their health and wellness. We had a great person tell us once, a doctor on our advisory committee, who said that the number one way to end childhood obesity is to end adult obesity, because the children will follow the example of their parents or their caregivers or their peers. So if we can create spaces that encourage adults to be more active, then children will be more active, and vice versa. So I think there's a benefit really for any type of organization to look in these outdoor spaces.
And I'll just add, if it depends on your goal. If your goal is to get broad reach, I mean, you saw the numbers at the beginning of this presentation. We're talking multiple millions of folks that you can reach through outdoor play and recreation spaces, especially for the interest of having them within a walking distance to the home. And we all know that parks are generally, or outdoor spaces are generally viewed very, very favorably, very positively in communities. It's hard to find examples where they're not supported, from the community. So that's, it's a positive place to be, and it certainly can have a lot of broad positive impacts beyond health and wellness.
And I'll just add to that as well. The branding on those spaces is it's not just there for, when you first open the park. Those spaces are going to be in that community for generations to come. All right, another question that came through. Are the locations chosen by the corporate partner or by the community, or in discussion with each other? Kent, I'll turn that over to you since you're familiar with a lot of our projects that we've worked on.
Sure. It is a collaborative partnership when we talk about site selection. We have great relationships after 90 plus years of working with park and rec directors across the country and throughout North America of understanding what needs are in communities. But we're also cognizant of the fact that those park directors are going to have specific objectives they're trying to meet. The community has objectives they're trying to meet. And, just to be quite honest, there are sometimes some corporate funders who decide that they really need to reach a specific segment of the community or a geographic location with their brand. And so it's a collaboration. We look at a lot of different data sets to determine where the need is best met for all the stakeholders. And then we narrow that down to a list of candidate locations and then identify the ones that work best. In the case of Blue Cross, they actually have a grant process where communities apply to become a healthy place. And so there's a very stringent set of criteria you have to meet to be considered and then to be awarded those projects. So it really takes everyone to make it work. You can't just come in and say, we're going to build a park there. You have to know why, and you have to know what the return is going to be for the funder.
And I'll just add about, knowing where to start. If you don't know where to start, we often look at what we know out there from what exists in terms of the metrics that we can curate. So we can curate information, data, right, to help us inform why, some of the whys that you're trying to impact throughout your geographic region. And what's cool about that is that it can help identify, goals for your project, but also the measures and the evaluation piece in the back end. So it's kind of a nice bookend, if you will. You've identified sites from community need, from what we know from public available data, and then we've connected that in the back end to how we're evaluating and asking for user experience and sentiments.
All right. One more question that came in. How has COVID impacted how communities think about outdoor spaces?
Well, I think it's done a couple of things. From the perspective of park and rec directors and community support groups, the outdoor spaces were a lifesaver, in many cases, literally. When you had indoor locations that had to be shut down because of COVID or because of municipal restrictions, the outdoor spaces, that was all that was left. So finding places outdoors to exercise, to work out, to have meetings, to have classes for schools, the outdoors suddenly became rediscovered in the last 2 years. And it's been remarkable for an organization like ours to see people embrace the outdoors again. There's so much good that comes from just spending even 15 minutes outdoors every day. So I think that was a big impact that was made by the COVID pandemic. The other thing is there's been a lot more emphasis on improving quality of life and associating with brands that believe in that and associating with organizations that fund those types of efforts. So I think what we're going to see years from now, after the pandemic has run its course, is that this was a turning point when people recognize that to be inclusive, to support social equity, you have to be in a space that everyone can enjoy. And a park is a bridge between all types of people, between all types of communities. It breaks down barriers when you have these multi-generational spaces.
Yeah, COVID has reminded us the importance of parks. I mean, I think in many communities, it was identified as an essential service, right? If they could remain open, they did, and they're probably the first to reopen. So we saw that with the increase in usage, 30% increase on average across communities around the country. So yeah, to the point Kent's been, it's reminded folks, it's certainly, I think, elevated up to a much higher level of importance and value. And it's reminded folks of how important it was for us to be outside, to connect with nature, to connect with our communities, and just for their own personal health and wellness value, as well as the quality of life for their community and their families.
Thank you.
Great, well,
I don't see any more questions coming in yet. I know we have a couple more minutes left. We'll open it back up and see if there's any more before we close out.
I just wanted to jump in and sort of piggyback, Kent, on what you were talking about in terms of, equity and inclusion. I mean, so many of our ACCP members are thinking about how they can impact equity in the communities where they live and work. And I think this is another way for companies to think about adding value back to their community. And so, I particularly enjoyed the example of the inclusive playground and thinking about how you can to your point, bring so many members of the community together in a single space and how important that can be. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So I want to thank you for your time. Russell and Ken and Catherine, and glad to have you with us in the CSR Marketplace Live, and that you want to connect with our community. And so hopefully everybody that was on the line today found this really helpful and will take advantage of that free resource that Kent pointed us to. There's a survey in the chat. If you take a minute to fill that out, that's helpful for all of us to gather your feedback. And as I mentioned, we will make a recording available to you together with the transcript and the slides. Look for those next week. So you'll have that follow-up to review or share with others. So thanks to everyone who joined us today. And Russell and Kent and Catherine, thank you so much for your time and your expertise this afternoon, and for sharing all of your good work out in the community.
Thank you so much. My email's on the screen if anyone would like to hear more or learn more about Impact Parks. Thank you very much, Erica.
Great. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.